And welcome back to Bloodborne. This time, we are in post-commentary for the whole thing. And we are also going to spend a fuckload of time in the Forbidden Woods. These are what my weapons are at this moment at. I mean, I'm past this point quite a bit, so this is outdated information, but that's how it is for this set. Now, the Forbidden Woods is an absolutely enormous area. We're going to be spending the majority of the time just going from top to bottom, just clearing out as much of it as possible. But first, there was an area up top that I left out when I went down here to pick up the lantern. It's a tiny little aside, but it leads to a blood gem that if you're on a non-arcane build you might want if you don't know it's there. That right there just demonstrates the some of the drawbacks of using the auger for actual like parries and backstabs and such. There's a lot of recovery time on the attacks, so it's not like using a blunderbuss or a pistol where you can quite easily close the distance and get the visceral attack in time. It very much depends. But that's that. It's still a very powerful hunter tool, even more so now than ever. We'll also be picking up another actually quite decent hunter tool in a minute. And the good thing about a lot of the hunter tools is that, at least for like hybrid arcane builds, is that they don't actually require a lot of investment in arcane. Like, most of them center around 15 arcane and are a great use. But things like the auger, where there's an actual damage modifier attached, they benefit dramatically from arcane. In fact, I don't think they have the same soft cap that arcane scaling weapons and Molotovs do. I think they don't really stop scaling with arcane, so that can be pretty powerful. I mean, I've already seen the results of that with some of the later hunter tools, and yeah, it's pretty crazy. But that'll be, I'm not entirely sure where I'm going to stop leveling arcane with this character, like 45 maybe? Something like that. That's a generally decent amount of arcane. Or any attack stat, to be honest. I suppose I can talk a bit about soft caps while I'm going through this area. For the most part with this game, as well as the Souls games, weapon scaling generally hits its first cap at 30. That's when it been like from like 0 to 30, although you'll never have 0 in the stat. That's when it benefits the most from like the actual scaling. Once it goes from 30 to 40 and then 40 to 50, it gets cut off more and more until you get to past 50 where it's almost useless. So I generally never go over 50 for things like strength or skill or dex, whatever. So now that little aside is done, we can actually go and traverse through the rest of the Forbidden Woods. And there's a neat little trap that's actually coming up that I thought I'd point out, because it's one that I almost always gloss over now, but I remember when I was watching people play through Bloodborne the first time, or I remember on Lobos' playthrough, he triggered this trap and then it did this, where it rolled off to the side where he was actually stood looking at the trap, and I remember seeing that and thinking, that's actually pretty neat for a trap to do that. Sort of a nice little touch that they add, so it's like, yeah, we know you can see the trap, but are you seeing this coming? Again, it's something that only really works once, but it's still kind of an amusing little trick. So I thought I'd demonstrate it anyway. Now, you can just run past a lot of the Forbidden Woods. A lot of these encounters don't really have a lot that's worth taking, but I decided to show them off anyway, because I was only really going to go through this area once. You can go over the top area here, and you completely miss out on the mob below, as well as the dogs and the guys who throw oil urns. So, as much as I've been benefiting from tremendous amounts of double damage from oil urns, so do these guys, which is why a lot of the mobs down there actually have torches. But, like with most encounters, if you take your time, assess the situation, you get the drop on enemies that would otherwise get the drop on you. And you're almost always rewarded for looking around and seeing like what you can do to deal with the situation. Of course you don't always have to, it depends very much on like how good you are at dealing with combat scenarios, I guess, but anything to make it a bit easier. So yeah, to the victor go the spoils. And now these oil urns aren't really going to cause much of a problem, there's almost nothing that can really do damage to me. I think for most of this area it's only just Bloodstone Shards and Twin Bloodstone Shards. Besides Yaha Ghul, this I think is the earliest place, I suppose besides the Nightmare Frontier as well, where you can actually pick up Twin Bloodstone Shards. So if you're just like running through the game as quickly as possible, this is an area where you can go and pick up some twinnies, as it were. And it's also got the first chunk as well, I think. But that's not going to be relevant until the likes of Canehurst Castle. There are a lot of side paths even in this upper area that don't really... There are a lot of dead ends, there are a lot of just like trap areas where it's like, ah, you fell down here, now face the consequences. But again, you take it slowly, it's pretty manageable anyway, so it's not like it matters all that much. Forbidden Woods is also kind of a really strange area in terms of its place in the story. It's sort of an intermediary point between you getting from central Liarnam to Byrgenwerth. And we'll be seeing a look at Byrgenwerth in a moment, when I get to the first, like, actually decent shortcut. But, what this area is, I don't... It might be a bit like Old Yarnum in that it's an old village that was hit by the Scourge, or something along those lines, but there are still, like, church hunters. As you can see in the white church garb, and there's another trap right there. Although this one doesn't quite pull off the same trick that the last one did. And you can go through there if you want, but again, it's better to just look around the side. And also this leads to a side area that will be... will lead to somewhere I'll go later on, because it's very important for story reasons. But yeah, again, take your time and assess it, it'll be fine. And then it's this.
Oh heavens, would you stop there? Every peep you make brings us bad luck. I have it bad enough already. Please, just leave a poor old woman be.
Normally you don't even get to hear this sort of dialogue, because once you reach the Forbidden Woods, patches start appearing in any of the incense areas where you usually talk to NPCs. But since I talked to him much earlier, before I even came down here, that you hear that woman, and it's a strange thing. Yeah, that's the area where you can go down later, which I will be going down later. But it's a strange thing that there are actually like residents within the Forbidden Woods. It's not, you know, a decrepit, abandoned place in the same way as, say, Old Yarnum. Although I imagine it would be very similar. But it's sort of a weird mix of connections to Byrgenwerth, but also just sort of like a dumping ground for the church, which you'll see a bit more of later, I suppose. And this is the White Church Guard. But this was originally the set I wanted to use for this this build, actually. But when the insidious Liam put in my head that I should be wearing a top hat, so thanks for that, I decided that Henrik's set would look a little better. This I was going to mix with probably the Knight's wig, although I pick it up later and see it's not that great. But I do really like the White Church set. It's just that it doesn't fit with a lot of other things, which is a shame because it looks really nice. But anyway, back to good old Henrik fashion. So yeah, it's both weird and perhaps a bit telling that there are still like a few people lurking around who have their wits about them, or at least until very recently did. It sort of indicates that the Forbidden Woods was not as forbidden as once set out to be. Or Byrgenwerth, for that matter. I wonder then what sort of secrets they'll be hiding. So this guy is responsible for a very Undead Parish sort of trap where the gate locks down and you're sort of blocked off from accessing the rest of the area until you do a little side area, which is the one I did first. But the dogs in those cages, when he pulls that gate, those dogs get released. So it's generally in your best interest to take the dogs out first. And you will almost completely forget, or not even realise there is even a trap there. Because you've just nullified it. Now here I get to demonstrate something about another very useful item, very similar to the lead elixir in terms of it being a utility item. And the blue elixirs they're essentially the same as Hidden Body in Dark Souls, where you get to make yourself partially invisible, and you might think, well, surely that's something more for PvP's sake, so that the players can't easily see you, but it's actually, oh yeah, you can do this as well, which is pretty funny. But it also affects, like with Hidden Body in Dark Souls, the aggro radius of the enemies. So it becomes a lot easier to sneak past or sneak up on enemies without them all turning up to ruin your day. Which means, again, you can get the drop on enemies who would otherwise have to drop on you. And it also has this indication. Hunters able to retain consciousness by force of will make use of a secondary effect of the medicine, which dilutes their presence while standing still. I mean, you don't have to stand still for it to work, really. It makes things a bit easier for hiding from other players. But, it emphasises, like, being able to retain consciousness by force of will. It's like, the blue elixirs allegedly are something akin to, I think, the Nightmare, the sort of lead elixir style things. Like, it's something from that research or from that actual area itself, where it sort of takes you out of existence in the same way Hidden Body does in Dark Souls, from that perspective. But it emphasises that hunters being able to retain their presence in this world. I mean, it leads a bit more credence to the idea that or reinforces, moreover, that hunters are sustained by the dream, and when they go through Yharnam or other nightmare areas, that's not actually their full selves, it's sort of a projection of themselves, like phantoms in Souls games. Or at least that's how I've rationalised it. It's probably the only reason you can keep coming back after you die, because I mentioned with Eileen and Jura, both of them are ex-hunters who no longer dream, so when they die, that's it for them. They don't get to keep coming back. Which I think is an interesting, in terms of emphasising how the nightmare and dream areas really work. They are generally just pocket dimensions. I don't know why they didn't just call them pocket dimensions or just other realms rather than just nightmares and dreams. Because as soon as you mention nightmares and dreams in a story, it suddenly becomes like, oh, maybe it's all a dream. Maybe none of what you're doing actually matters because it's all in your head. And you're like, Jesus Christ. I absolutely hate that sort of story development because it takes a lot of the significance out of what the characters are actually doing in the story. And besides, Yharnam has a history. The land before it, Thumeru, has a history as well. It's a place grounded within, like, a historical precedent within the world. Which is why I'm so reluctant to think of it as just, it's a dreamland which you're entering. It doesn't have a lot of credence, that interpretation, I don't think. And yeah, that's another shortcut you can take. It's honestly not a very useful shortcut, but it's one you can take if you happen to die in between going from here to the actual shortcut, which I'll be probably which I think I'll stop this part at if I recall correctly. And yeah, you don't want to go down that way. There's just oily water abounds, and you have guys throwing molotovs at you for the same reason as you don't want to get hit by oil urns. That will really ruin your day in a very burny way. So instead, go back to the area where the dogs were and just go over the rafters and such. In fact, that's where the next hunter tool is, and I'll get to talk about that, because it's actually quite an interesting one, as well as quite a fun one to use. So I hope you're getting an idea of the scale of this place, because this is about like a third of the size of the Forbidden Woods. It is enormous. Absolutely enormous. And if you want to get Bagmanned, this is your last chance to get Bagmanned, really. He is the last Bagman you see in main story progression unless you backtrack, I suppose. So, if you want to go to Yahar Ghul and you haven't yet, he's there. And that is the Hunter Tool. The good old Beast Roar. Borrow the strength of the terrible undead dark beasts, if only for a moment, to blast surrounding foes back with the force of a roaring beast. The indescribable sound is broadcast with the caster's own vocal cords. First off, the mention of undead dark beasts is very strange, because generally, in the previous games, being undead was a very, very significant part of the story for things like Dark Souls, or explicitly Dark Souls, because being undead was basically the reason why you came back, and it was linked to the Dark Soul. In this, it's strange to see it come up, because it doesn't really... It's like a lot of the supernatural elements of Bloodborne, it doesn't really get a lot of explanation or much delving into it, but I guess it does explain why Dark Beast Parl is just this big skeletal beast. Because it's assumed that he must be undead, if that's the case. And he's not the Dark Beasts are not the only undead beasts either. There is the undead giant in the Thumeru Chalice dungeons. But it doesn't really seem to have the same significance, or indeed much really done with it. It's just sort of an excuse to have, like, undying beings or something like that. It's strange. But, that point about it emphasizing that the strength is something that originates from your own vocal cords, and like how it's disconcerting and banned because it has some horrific suggestions about humanity, emphasizes the main agenda of organizations like the Church or the School of Mensis, and that they want to be more than just sort of beasts. They see like humanity as it is being plagued by beastly idiocy, and I think Yosefka says very similar things if you talk to her behind the door, or fake Yosefka anyway. We never actually find out her real name. Oh yeah, I'm not sure if I mentioned that explicitly yet. There is a fake Yosefka behind that door. If you hadn't already guessed, she's not the trustworthiest of people. But the main agenda behind like seeking communion and gaining insight and eyes on the inside is sort of to get away from the beastliness of humanity and try to ascend to a higher being, one that doesn't have to worry about being beastly. But what that actually entails, well, will be discussed the more you hear about the Great Ones and how the characters of Bloodborne interact with the Great Ones. We're actually getting close to the main central shortcut area, but as you can see, there's a rather destructive force getting in our way. What you can do in this situation is do what I did and just dart between the houses if you want. You'll very rarely get hit by the cannon unless you're just arsing around. But there's also a side area that I uncover a bit later when I go back through. That just allows you to go from house to house without ever being exposed to the cannon. It honestly doesn't matter that much, as I said before, you're very unlikely to be hit by the cannon. But that's what you can do. And you can just do this, you can just rush immediately to him. He's not that tough. It does give me time to talk about it. You can actually interact with this cannon. And I think it's pretty much the only cannon in the main game that you can interact with in such a way. There are some in the Chalice dungeons, but as you'll see in a moment, they're not really that useful. Like, I imagine if you're an invader or there's an invader in your world, you can pull it, but you can see it takes so long to wind up, and you can't really change its directory anyway. It just keeps hitting that same spot. Pistol range, like, it's very clear the enemy actually knows what they're doing, and they can actually aim it. Or alternatively, they cheat, but yeah, it's a shame really. You just have that feature there, but nothing's really done with it from a player perspective. Like, from an enemy's perspective, it's just another hazard. And yeah, you can smash these things to go through from house to house. That's what you can do if you wish to. But that's the main body of the upper Forbidden Woods done. Yeah, that took an awful long time, didn't it? And there's a couple of NPCs I will be talking to before this part is finished. One of whom is actually quite interesting because they're not an NPC that was originally in the game. They were introduced in a patch that which was followed shortly after by the DLC, because they were in effect a DLC character, but they introduced a new covenant into the game. And a new very fancy set of attire that I think I'll be putting on a new character when I get back to the lovely PS4. And here we get our first indication of what sort of things we'll be fighting in the Forbidden Woods. Play Resident Evil 4 much, Miyazaki? Yeah, that's a very strange one. Just you're going and whacking a guy and suddenly snakes come out of his head. Is there any explanation for why there's a snake man with loads of snakes coming out of his head? No, not really. Yeah, it's just a snake dude with snakes in his head. Enjoy. But yeah, Forbidden Woods is very snake heavy. And as you'll see, once you get to the lower parts of the Forbidden Woods and closer to Byrgenwerth, it becomes a lot less like an abandoned village and a lot more like an enormous graveyard. Which is always a nice thing to see. Now, in a moment I'll be talking to another quite important NPC in terms of how you deal with them. But I'll also be stopping a minute and having a look at the surroundings, because, again, like with Dark Souls, looking around at the skybox and the area around you can indicate a lot of things about where you'll be able to go. For instance, right ahead of us, as long as I stop moving along here, showing a load of woodland area, that is Byrgenwerth. And it's overlooking the lake we've heard so much about. Or at least the lake that's going to be heard so much about. I actually haven't got the runes that talk about it in great detail, besides the one from Hemwick Charnel Lane. But the lake is very important indeed, and we'll see why when we go to Byrgenwerth. But first, nice little indication you can actually come up here by using the poison knives. We have this rather trustworthy individual right here. Now tell me if you see anything that might be considered a bit off here. He's there eating away at what seems to be a child's corpse. He's got a bunch of bodies around him, and there's blood all over the place and on him. I mean, yeah, there's blood on me, so who's judging on that front, but... yeah. Let's talk to him.
Whoa! Blimey, don't scare me like that. On a night like this, I took you for a monster. Oh, thank the stars, you're fairly normal. Was it you who put down that awful beast? Ooh, that thing had me trembling, frozen in my boots. And then you came along. Well, if you're a hunter, then would you know of any safe havens?
No, none spring to mind.
Oh, yeah, of course not. I should have known. This whole place is falling apart once again. It's the curse of Yharnam.
It's interesting that you said the curse of Yharnam, emphasising that Yharnam keeps having these hunts over and over and over again, although this might be the last one because of just how devastating it is. But yeah, He looks totally trustworthy, doesn't he? I know just where to send trustworthy people.
Oh, you again. You find any nice, cosy place?
Yeah! You heard of this place?
Well, I'll be. Thank you. It's about time I made a move. I can't very well stay out on my own. Oh, you're giving me hope. Terribly kind of you. Take this. It's all I can offer us, thanks. Thank you. It's about time I made a move. I can't very well stay out on my own.
Now, this NPC is... To spoil it, he's the Lautrec of the game. If you send him to Erden Chapel, he will systematically start killing everybody there. And he'll be giving you, I think, beast blood pellets and pungent blood cocktails every time he does so. It's triggered by, if I recall correctly, you beating bosses. But I'll break that momentarily aside to say this is where you pick up the cannon. It is useless now, because people saw that it could one or two shot people in PvP and said, no, it's OP, even though it's stupidly easy to dodge. So they made it use 12 bullets instead of 10, even though that doesn't actually nerf the damage people complained about. So, yeah, it's pretty useless now. Great job. Talking about that NPC there, that's what happens if you send him to Erden Chapel. You send him to Yosefka's clinic, he's treated like every other NPC you send to Yosefka's clinic. And there's a very important shortcut bit we need to remember for later. But if you do something else, if you choose to fight him, either here or at Erden Chapel, he's no joke. Like, despite his appearance, he is no joke. I'm not going to spoil it. I recommend, if you have this game, you give it a shot yourself at some point, because it's a great fight and there's some great dialogue. And if you're having trouble with it, there's poison knives around for a reason. One poison knife, full poison. And you can just choose them that way if you really want. And he is a nasty ass enemy. He's actually his design is used as a boss later in the Chalice dungeons. And I'm not too sure about what I'm going to do with the Chalice dungeons, but I think I'll at least show off some of the unique bosses. So you'll be seeing it, ideally. But yeah, he's no joke. And there's the first shortcut. And that NPC I was talking about earlier, that's him over there. He is... In a sense, he is essentially the Slayer of this game. Like, a lot of people heard, like, Slayer's voice actor as Alfred and is like, oh god, Alfred must be the new Slayer. No, he's nothing like Slayer. This guy fits the bill a bit more, with his Ned Kelly-esque attire and his fancy constable set. Which sadly doesn't have a hat. That would have been lovely. But, alas. Let's actually go and talk to him. Let's see what he's all about.
Ah, a new face, are you? And an accomplished hunter, it would appear.
So it would seem.
I am Volta, master of the League. Members of the League cleanse the streets of all the filth that's spread about during the hunt. Like any half-decent hunter ought to, you know? Haven't you seen enough of these wretched beasts? Freakish slugs and mad doctors. Sentence these fiends to death with the help of your League Federates. What do you say? Why not join the League?
With Oath Rune decisions like this, there's almost no reason to say no.
As a hunter, well should. Commit this to heart. Our own Carol Rune, symbol of the League. The night brims with defiled scum and is permeated by their rotten stench. Just think, now you're all set to hunt and kill to your heart's content. Hunt in cooperation with your fellows, your League Confederates. Now, there is one thing you must know. By the oath of the League, those who bear its rune will see vermin. Vermin writhe deep within all filth and are the root of man's impurity. All vermin are to be crushed. The League exists to expunge all vermin, ridding us of any trace of human corruption. And so, until we are rid of all vermin, you must continue to hunt and kill. This bloody fate is ours alone. Do not expect the world to grasp our work. But remember, the Confederates will always have my blessing. And each other. Always.
So yeah, he sounds a bit on the mental side, doesn't he? So this is coloured differently to the other runes because it is an oath rune. It goes in the final slot of the similar colour, as you can see on the top right there. Unlike Covenants in Dark Souls 1, entering and leaving Covenants doesn't nearly have the same consequences. You can pick and choose whenever the hell you want. But for now, I'll see you in the next part.